Hey, I'm Josh Mia, CEO and founder of Driving School Marketing, and you're watching episode 1 of the Driving School Marketing Growth Track. And the purpose of this video is to talk about the types of strategies that other driving schools are using that we see that help them grow their businesses effectively, help them earn more profits. And the topic of today is how to protect your driving school from your own instructors, right? So if you have these instructors, you've hired them, and you think to yourself, how can I make sure that if we part ways, that they're not competing against me, they're not soliciting my customers? We've heard horror stories. I want to talk to you about those horror stories. I want to talk to you about ways to prevent these types of situations. And I want to talk to you about ways to handle them after they've actually come into fruition. So here we go. So I'm going to be honest with you. These stories get pretty bad. Because what happens is, so you hire a driving instructor, they're an employee, they're part of your team. You know, you likely don't have a huge company, right? So most driving schools, if you're watching this, you're either one instructor, maybe you've got 2 other instructors, something like that. Or if you're a larger school, and we definitely have clients like that, maybe you have 10 or 15 instructors or maybe more. But the bottom line is that you really feel the effect of the relationships you have with your instructors. And of course, it's very true that it's really hard to hire instructors, right? Because they have to be qualified. Your individual state has their own laws. If you're in Canada, your province has their own laws, what have you. And so it's hard to get these instructors. And then once you have them, you know, what happens if you part ways? And so one story that I have comes from a client. I'm never going to name the actual client, but what I will tell you is that it's a school. We'll call him Scott as the driving school owner and the guy that I work with directly. He tells me that this guy that he worked with, who built his driving school with him, right, from the ground up. So they had no customers, then they went to eventually having over 2,500 students go through their school. And this guy was his direct partner. And they just disagreed on money. Right? It wouldn't be the first time that you heard about a business where the 2 people who started the company disagreed on money. And ultimately what happened was Scott's partner left. But Scott's partner had all the contacts to the existing customers. He knew exactly how to work the business. He certainly knew the market well. They also had clients that came from local high schools, right? Because they had partnerships with these high schools. And so you have all these contacts, all these people in touch, and now they previously owned their market. They built it from one instructor to multiple instructors. They owned their market, and now all of a sudden, one of this guy's, Scott's, top competitors is his actual former instructor. They learned together, and this guy is going after him, mano a mano. And it's a horrible story because what it means is that now you're competing on price with the guy who knows your exact business. You're competing on brand with a guy who knows your exact business. And then of course, it's very stressful, right? When you start a business, it's kind of like a marriage when you're working with someone. I mean, you see them all the time, you know so much about each other. And so what you want to do is make sure that you are protected. And that's just one horror story. Another horror story is not even from a business partner, but just sort of a normal instructor, right? So a regular instructor, no equity in the business. My client had to fire this instructor for whatever reason, unimportant. But what is important is the fact that that instructor later on, because they felt that everything just went so poorly the way they departed the company, they left negative online reviews. You know, they're again, contacting previous customers. All of a sudden, your brand is sort of being attacked online and in the community. And what can you really do about that? And these are the types of things you want to pay attention to, because if you want to be able to grow your driving school, you want to be able to have effective relationships with your instructors, because they're going to be in the car, right, with all of your students. So it's absolutely essential that these people who are the #1 representatives of your company and are absolutely essential in order for you to grow your business successfully are built. You know, they're building a relationship with you in a way that protects your business. So, you know, those are a couple horror stories. Those are examples of things that we see a little more commonly than you'd like to believe. And if you've had this kind of thing happen to you, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, you definitely want to look out for it. So now I want to talk to you about how to prevent some of that and how to deal with it if it happens. So let's get started on those issues. So what's interesting is that one of the biggest risk factors for why this tends to occur is because the business is so local. You hire these instructors and you're literally in the same town. It's not like you hire this instructor and they're operating out in Washington State when you're in New York City. These are people who know the exact same people that you do. And because of that, you're sort of at risk the second you bring these people on, because driving schools are so local. Most driving schools don't go outside of a 25-mile radius to service their customers. And even 25 miles is honestly a little bit far. So that means that in order to mitigate this type of issue, the first thing you have to do is pay attention to it, because absolutely one of the biggest risk factors is you're hiring a very local person. So now I want to talk to you about the ways to actually prevent this kind of issue from happening, because clearly it's expensive, clearly it impacts your company, it impacts your customers, it's a really big deal, not to mention it's horribly stressful, right? You operate a business and all of a sudden you lose one of your partners or instructors and they're, attacking you either as a competitor or they're attacking your brand, you're just going to lose some sleep. And that's honestly just kind of life as a business owner. But there's things that you can do to protect yourself. And the number one thing, to be honest, has to do with the hiring process. The hiring process needs to include certain documentation that protects you. You need employer-employee agreements, formal agreements, actual things that protect your reputation. For example, the things you want to think about: a non-disclosure agreement, the ways that you conduct your business, the data that you collect, including your customer names, their parents' names, phone numbers, email addresses. You want this stuff to be things that other people can't use for other purposes. This is your data, it's your information. And by making sure you have a clear non-disclosure agreement as part of your hiring process, that helps you make sure that you don't have to worry about this issue about people using your data for other purposes. That's part one. Part two is having a non-solicitation clause as part of the agreement. And the reason you want a non-solicitation clause, and what that really means, is, your driving instructors are coming into contact with your actual customers. They're coming into contact with those customers because those customers have engaged you for services, your business. So if your driving instructor leaves that business, a non-solicitation agreement says that you cannot contact my customers, my previous customers that you interacted with by virtue of your employment with my driving school for whatever reason, right? You don't want them, not to mention, you don't want any driving instructor contacting any teenager that you teach for any reason not related to driving instruction. So, you want to make that absolutely clear. But on top of that, you really want non-solicitation to be part of that, because you don't want them contacting people who are part of your business to solicit them to build a competing driving school. You just don't want that to happen. And so a non-solicitation agreement or clause as part of your non-disclosure agreement is important. Now, the third part of this that's really important is actually a non-compete. Now, the issue with a non-compete is that frequently, kind of state to state, and you want to think about this and contact a lawyer in your area, is that non-competes are frequently somewhat non-enforceable. Courts just kind of choose not to enforce it, and there's good reasons for that. So when someone trains to be a driving instructor, they've invested in their future. They have a certain license that allows them to take on a certain type of work. And if you say you can't compete with me, a court could easily say, well, that's ridiculous. This guy became a driving instructor, this woman or man became a driving instructor, and they have a right to participate in their trade. Meaning they have a right to, continue to seek employment or opportunity related to exactly what they do. However, that doesn't mean that you cannot also include a non-compete as part of your agreement anyway. There's a few reasons why you want to do that. One is because the non-compete agreement is just there. It protects you. They know they signed it. You know they signed it. And a lot of times people are hesitant to actually go back on a non-compete agreement because they don't want to deal with lawyers. Just being honest with you. Part two is at least you have an ethical agreement in place, right? Someone said to you and you guys agreed, we're not going to do this. If we stop working together for whatever reason, you're going to go do something else, or you work with a different driving school, or you're not going to go and start one and directly compete with me. That's just going to protect you. And the third thing is that, frankly, maybe the courts will use it to some extent. Maybe there is, as long as you have that language in your employer agreement, maybe there's an opportunity for you to collect on damages if someone opens a competing driving school directly in your area and your state is maybe receptive to that non-compete agreement. So each of those components, a non-disclosure agreement, a non-solicitation agreement, and a non-compete agreement, which could all be part of your same employer hiring documentation, are key preventative measures that help you make sure that you are protected in the event that you no longer have that same instructor on your staff. And those are the things that you can take on from a hiring process. From the secondary type of thing you can do is just do your best to have a really healthy rapport with the instructors themselves. A lot of times, the reason people start a competing driving school is because they have kind of bad blood with their former employer. And listen, you can't make everybody happy all the time, but if you have a positive reputation for how you conduct yourself, that gives people far less ammunition for saying, I left this guy or I left this driving school to start my own thing because frankly, they weren't really good to me and I just feel like I need to go out on my own, and they can start bash your reputation. Just be a good person in the way you conduct your business. That's going to give them far less ammunition to attack your brand. And because what you want to do is from the very outset, don't offer anybody any opportunity to attack your company. And so by making sure you have positive relationships with your instructors to the best that you can, you conduct yourself professionally, etc., that's going to make a difference. A third thing you can do is to create kind of barriers for them to be able to compete with you successfully. One way to do that is to invest in technology. So if you have the right technology for handling online booking, scheduling, things of that nature, and you have a real process for taking on students, it's going to be really hard for people to actually just sort of enter your market space, regardless of whether they leave you as an instructor. The second part of that is the actual marketing itself. So if your website, for example, has an active organic website presence where you're getting website traffic locally, and your Facebook campaigns are strong and you have good connection with the local high schools and other places that send you referrals, those are basically barriers to entry. Driving school is a very local business. And the stronger your brand is, the more you can basically prevent someone even wanting to challenge you. And so by having very strong marketing, that becomes a barrier to entry if someone were to try to leave your driving school to start a competing one, because the community they just trust you too much. So those are some of the things that you can do to prevent someone from really challenging your status as a successful driving school in your local market. So the one thing that I'll say is that of the things that I talked about just now, the documentation related to the employer agreement when it comes to a non-compete, a non-disclosure, and a non-solicitation, those are to some extent actual preventative measures that can protect you if someone wanted to directly compete with you or take your customers away from your business, that kind of thing. The other stuff related to investing in technology and sound processes and having strong marketing and branding, those are just more deterrent things, because it would just be an exhaustive process for someone to go out and try and compete with you because you're just already clearly the winner. So you're trying to invest in things that are preventative and things that will deter, because those will both protect your business in the event that for whatever reason, a certain instructor that previously worked with you decides to compete with you. And so now at this point, we've talked about the horror stories that are possible when you have an instructor that you lose and they go out and compete against you. And we've talked about some of the preventative measures and some of the things that would be active deterrents, to stop folks. But now I want to talk to you a little bit more about what to do when, the worst has already happened, right? Your instructor is gone and they're competing with you and they hate your guts and there's nothing you can do, irreconcilable differences, right? And you're just trying to figure out, what can you do to kind of make sure you maintain your stable footing. And so the first thing to remember is that you already are winning. And that's really, really important to keep top of mind, is that you already have the active driving school, you already have a history of getting customers, you already have a local reputation, you already are a trusted force in the community when it comes to driver education. So yes, you have a new competitor, but they don't have to compete with someone who's established and they're entirely new. So the first thing you want to remember is that as stressful as it might feel to suddenly feel as though you were stabbed in the back, or whatever feeling you might have about losing that instructor who's now competing with you, you have strategic advantages in place that can protect you. Keep that mindset through the rest of your process of competition. The second is that you just want to get ready to compete, right? And you've already been competing. Certainly if you've been working with us or you've been investing in your marketing, your systems or whatever, you're already in a place where you have been competing in the industry for a while, right? You've been competing against other driving schools, you've been competing against people teaching their own kids whether or not it's a good idea, with other driver improvement schools, what have you, whatever it is. So you've already been in this space. You're just not used to competing with someone that you know so well. If this is a new experience for you, to compete with someone who used to work with you. So a lot of what you already have is there. So again, remember you're already winning. 2, remember that you already have a history of competition. And now 3 is to actually just compete more. And by competing more, I mean check everything. Do a full audit of how you conduct your business. Look at your marketing processes. What can you do to strengthen your marketing processes? Because if you can make sure that your Facebook presence is strong, that your Google presence is strong, that your connections with the local schools is strong, that you reach out to hospitals in case you do driver rehabilitation, you reach out to lawyers in case you're going to get referrals in case of driver improvement. You've done all of these things. That's going to mean that you're just actively competing and leveraging, your existing relationships to the maximum extent, and that's going to protect you, through this inevitable, new competitor. The second thing is that in addition to just investing in your marketing, you want to reevaluate your systems, right? So what were the things that were ultimately taken from you, right? Are you worried about your customer list being contacted? Are you worried about different things related to your brand, being stolen or misused or whatever it is? Look at how you're currently protecting your data, right? Is it easy for someone to, for example, just take a spreadsheet of all your customers and contact them? Do you have an organized way where people can't just download all your customer data, or just if you're literally using paper? Do you have a way that you have a locked file cabinet or something so that people can't just take your data and do something with it? And the other reason why you want to do an audit is because if someone actually did leave on bad terms with your business, and they are actively interested in harming your business, you definitely want to make sure that your data is secure. And that's because from a regulatory standpoint, you are always at the risk of audit, right? As you know, driver education is a fairly regulated business. And people are always at the risk of being audited. Are your records in place if you were to be asked about, all of these students who you said passed their driver test, if you administer the driver test? Are forms signed? All of these documents in place? Because the other horror story that I can certainly talk to you about are just the many instances of driving schools not surviving a formalized audit. And when an instructor is looking to harm your business, one way for them to do that is certainly to mess with your data. And even though you may not want to kind of think in those terms, it is important to make sure you do that. So if you've already kind of lost your instructor and your business is now officially at risk, the things you want to do it's a 3-part process. 1 is just remember that you're already winning, you have the established business. 2 is just make sure that you know that you need to compete, and you've been competing. You have a history of competing and a history of being successful at it. And then the 3rd part is just, look at all those ways you've been competing and compete more. Just get out there a little more. Do an audit of your marketing, do an audit of your systems, and an audit of your data, because that's going to make sure that your business is protected. And those are the steps you want to take if the worst has already taken place. I just hope this information was really valuable for you. So that's it for episode 1 of the Driving School Growth Track. We're going to change up the format of these videos every now and then, but generally speaking, this is good information. I encourage you to comment down below about the types of horror stories that you've experienced or that you've heard about, or if you have any questions or comments of any kind, just go ahead and leave them. I will respond to them, or just reach out to me at josh@DrivingSchool.Marketing.